And our last reader for this set circles us right back to Riverkeeper. I'm so pleased to introduce my Stone Ridge neighbor and National Geographic ocean hero, Jon Bowermaster, who is an explorer, a writer, a documentary filmmaker. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you, Nina. Of course, now I'm not going to talk about water at all. I mean, it is true. I have a long history of ocean stories and water stories. We've got a short film series out there right now called Hudson River at Risk, which is touring for 6 months from Troy to Manhattan, all about the issues that Riverkeeper works on. I'm quite close with my friends at Riverkeeper, but today I thought I'd read something that was actually more about resistance than about water. I hope that's all right. Yeah. By some quirk of fate, in 1990, I was in Nairobi, Kenya, and I ended up in the hospital room of a young, well, I guess not so young, middle-aged environmental activist in Kenya named Wangari Maathai, who had been badly beaten by police the day before. And so this is the story of that day. Wangari, of course, I think the story was first published in the New Republic in 1991, but it was republished in National Geographic in 2004 when Wangari won the Nobel Prize, the first African to do so. The first thing Wangari Maathai did when she regained consciousness was call a press conference. When she came out of her club in Forest days, she was in a Nairobi hospital, having been badly beaten by Kenyan police during a demonstration the day before. It was a Saturday, and I was one of a dozen friends and journalists who showed up to hear her side of the conflict. The police had already been to the papers, claimed the outspoken environmentalist cum political activist had incited them. Upon hearing her clubber's account, Maathai couldn't help but smile over its ridiculousness. She looked a mess, one eye blackened, her forehead labeled with a knot the size of a Spalding. The thrashing administered her 51-year-old legs made it hard for her to walk to the bathroom, where she vomited blood. The morning's paper carried other stories of a kind found only in Kenya. A pair of Maathai's friends had been jailed for rumor mongering, and local bus operators had decreed that anyone heard talking politics on their public carriers would be handed over to police. The day before had begun typically for Africa's best-known environmentalist. Maathai had joined a long-planned protest by mothers of political prisoners calling for the release of their sons. The outspoken Maathai felt a responsibility to the jailed men who had been locked up for the crime of speaking out for democracy in a country run by autocratic thugs. Merely showing up at the rally made her a target for authorities, once again. This was not the first time the founder of Kenya's 15-year-old Greenbelt movement had been hospitalized thanks to government goons. In the past few years, as her worldwide notoriety had grown, as she traveled abroad to accept award after award for environmental and political heroism, she had come home to be harassed, arrested, beaten, and threatened with rape. Her Nairobi office was first ransacked, then confiscated by the government. On that day, she'd come back from lunch to find security forces from the president's office throwing her papers and books out a second-story window onto a crowded downtown street. Her activist roots were mild in first world terms. The first Kenyan woman to earn a PhD in anatomy and the first to become a professor at the University of Nairobi. Dr. Maathai took on a formidable challenge in 1977 to hold back Kenya's advancing desert. Rampant tree cutting and unchecked population growth had stripped much of the country's land, playing a hand in generating both hunger and poverty. Her response, dubbed the Greenbelt movement, was a national tree planting program run by women. Because women here are responsible for their children, she explained at the time, they cannot sit back, waste time, and see them starve. With Greenbelt support, women across Kenya established nurseries within their villages and then persuaded farmers to accept and raise tree seedlings. Greenbelt paid the women 2 cents for each native plant they grew. Exotic species were worth 1/5 as much. Farmers received the plants for free. In a decade, she had recruited more than 50,000 women who had spurred the plantings of 10 million trees. While the seedlings took root, Maathai traveled the country speaking out for women's and human rights. She's been rewarded for her efforts with a bevy of awards and acclaim from around the world for environmentalism and activism. None of her activities were looked upon favorably by Kenyan President Daniel Arap Moi. Her gravest sin, either her biggest mistake or success, depending on whose side you take, came 3 years ago when she was very publicly scuttled Moi's plan to build a 60-story office adjoining downtown Nairobi. The building was to be flanked by a large statue of the 17-year president. Both were to be paid for by foreign aid monies. By personal plea and public rally, Matai persuaded donors that the project was environmentally, aesthetically, and fiscally unsound, and Moi's dream was deferred. While that victory may have earned her popularity among the workers who used the park, it assured her the eternal enmity of the ruling party, in particular Moi, and the government-owned newspaper and television stations that were to have gotten luxurious offices in the new building. The day after the project was officially announced dead, headlines in the Daily Nation accused Matai of having insects in her head. A year later, when she won the prestigious Goldman Environmental Prize, CNN International broadcast a story about the 6 wonders from around the globe. Government-employed censors edited out the 3-minute segment on Matai when the piece was aired in Kenya. She's rumored to be on Moi's shortlisting for either extradition or an accident. Not out of the question from a government whose finance minister once threw a political opponent out of a helicopter. Yesterday's beating was part of a constant campaign of harassment against Matai. Soon after his office building was KO'd, Moi ruled that foreign assistance to women's development projects must be channeled through the state women's organization, effectively cutting off outside aid to the Greenbelt movement. She's currently awaiting trial on charges of incitement and rumor mongering. Yet she continues to be publicly critical of the police state that her homeland has become. After reading the front page of the newspaper, sitting up in her hospital bed, Matai looks up at the crowd gathered in her room. They don't understand, do they? I'm not being critical of the government. I'm just talking the truth. Perhaps President Moi believes I should protect the image of our government just because it is our government. But I know that I am talking about a government that does not like to be criticized. That's why I have been in trouble. Despite her bruises, she comes off more steadfast than scared. I know I'm in danger, and I know that the government has tried to push me aside. At the moment, because of the political turmoil in my own country, one cannot rule out the possibility of the worst. So I do feel that I need to take care of myself. I need to stay away from dangerous ground. But that doesn't mean that I will back down. I will not go away. But that doesn't mean that I will back down. I will not go away. I will not just go away, which is what they would like, because this is where I am needed most. My message has not shifted. If anything, it has just become less subtle.